day early.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Yep, we are ready when you are.
Good. So welcome to the November meeting of SACRE. Due to government guidance on social distancing and COVID-19 virus, the Standing Advisory Council for Religious Education on 4th of November 2020 will be held virtually online. The press and public will be able to watch the meeting live online by following the link at thurrock.gov.uk/webcast. The agenda is as published. I'll start with just a bit of an introduction. This is my first time chairing this meeting, so I'm delighted to be taking over as chair. And although we minuted it last time, I'm sure we would all like to record again our thanks to Reverend John Guest for his years of service in chairing this SACRE. I'd like to set a duration for the meeting, just out of respect for everyone's time and recognising that these are sort of Teams and Zoom meetings can be quite tiring for everyone. Kenna, is there a standard duration for this meeting?
Rachel, we would usually say for a meeting, say 2 hours, but obviously it depends on the amount of detail that members would wish to go into, or how the discussions go. So I'm sure members will be guided by you, Chair, if you wanted to kind of not hold it quite as long, or just kind of see how it runs. I'm happy to see how it goes.
In terms of expectations, is everyone happy that we go for 90 minutes? If there are items that we feel we would like to continue after that, then that's obviously our choice as a committee. But to some extent, if we're all heading towards a deadline, then hopefully we'll make sure we keep things moving along. Some of these subjects would merit an hour's discussion on their own. So really, the content isn't going to limit itself. We do need to take that action on. So let's go for that at least as an aspiration. We can start with item 1, which is apologies for absence. Kenna, have we received any formal apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We have. We've received apologies from Collins. We've also received an apology. Sorry, bear with me. I made a note from Ms. Kerr as well. So we've got 4 apologies.
Okay, sorry, I think I missed one of those.
Let's have a look. So from Committee A, there's Ms. Kerr, who's our SACRE member. And then there is Ms. Webster and Councillor Collins.
Great, thank you.
Can I suggest we also need to add that Amanda Harris, who's on Committee C, has actually moved now, so she no longer lives or works in Thurrock, so she's resigned.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's ensure that's noted. And I guess at this point, before we move on, we also ought to note that I believe that this evening is Stella Nawson's final meeting as a member of SACRE. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
So retiring from the committee, I guess, although your involvement predates mine, so I feel like the junior partner here. On behalf of the SACRE, I'd like to thank you for the years of service that you put in. How many years is it?
I've lost count. I can't remember.
Yeah, I mean, clearly this is it's a hugely important thing to do. It's a little recognised thing to do, and we are very much dependent on people who are willing to put the effort to providing firm foundations and monitoring good standards for religious education in Thurrock. And your contribution to that over many years is very much appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to minutes. We have in front of us the minutes of the meeting of 3rd of June 2020. Are there any observations or comments on the accuracy of the minutes? And if not, we'd be happy to approve those as an accurate record. Silence indicating assent. I did check the procedures. We're not required to take a vote on things like this, so if anybody has any comments, it's on yourselves to pipe up with them. I'm not going to be able to sign them online, am I? So how do we do this?
As long as the committee agree, Chair, we can look at we'll take that they're signed. But
Okay, so I'm happy to minute that they are accepted and signed virtually then.
Phil, just a minor thing. My surname's spelt wrong on the top of the minutes. If that can be corrected.
Yes, we really ought to avoid that, shouldn't we?
Everything else is fine though.
Yeah, apologies for that. I'll make that amendment. Thank you.
Kenna, one other small thing as well. It's the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education, not for. I know logically it sounds like it should be for, but it's not. It's on. Sorry, being a pedant. Andrea's got her hand up, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was just asking if people, when they're not talking, if they could mute, because there's some feedback that might affect the recording. And it's, I know I've got a lot of fireworks going off here, so it'd be better for everyone, I think, if we just check on your microphone button at the bottom of the screen. You should be able to just click on it. It will mute you.
Yep, I've just done that. So moving on to item 3, items of urgent business, there are none. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, none noted. I'm going to suggest that we reverse the orders of items 6 and 7, just because I suspect if we're going to time out, it's going to be on the items of national interest, of which there is quite a long list. And I'm keen that we do approve the work plan, because that sets our plan for the rest of the year. So we'll have a look at the work plan before we go on to national developments and opportunities. But starting with item 5, provision for RE in Thurrock schools, if I can hand over to Deborah to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. So if I can draw your attention then to the document that starts on page 11 of your papers. The thing we've noticed is that the actual spreadsheet, which appears on page 15, is round the wrong way. So it's actually fairly tricky to be able to see the way the data has worked out. But what I did was I went through all the data and made a summary of what the concerns might be. Have they appeared actually, Kenneth? You know, the summary notes? They don't appear to have done so. Anyway, what I'll do is I'll share my screen so that you can see what is going on. Right, let's see if this works. Up arrow, Adisha told me. So up arrow I shall do. And then I've got to pick the right screen. Can you all see a spreadsheet?
Yes.
Excellent. Good.
Yes.
Can you see Phil in the corner as well? Maybe not. Okay, so if you have a look at this screen, you'll see that the good news is there's a number of schools where things have stayed consistent. So if you look along at Gray's Convent, for example, you'll see the amount of time dedicated to RE is remaining constant from what it was the previous year. And Key Stage 3 is much better in Thurrock than elsewhere. So when you're going up into Key Stage 4, you've got quite a number of schools here that report that they are not providing any RE at Key Stage 4, which of course is what they're supposed to be doing. So I made a summary of those on the report, and on here you can see exactly what those things were. The only challenge we've got really, or the main challenge we've got, is that sometimes schools report incorrectly. And certainly Angela Jellicoe reported that in the case of St Clair's, you can see St Clair's here, she has actually got an option group running and there's RE being provided in form time, and none of that is being reported. So with your permission, I'd like to follow that up with St Clair's and explain to them that it's definitely in their best interest to report this data accurately, because it looks like they're reporting as if they are non-compliant with the statutory subject. I suppose the question is what action you would like us to take in relation to this data. So I'd like to hand over to you to ask questions and make comments about what kind of action you'd like to take.
Okay, so let's open it up to questions from the committee and any suggestions for action that we could or should take, please.
Oh, crap!
Apologies for noises off. I'll go first then if nobody else is going to. So rather helpfully, there's an item later on which talks about national averages for these statistics, because clearly it's good that we have some data. I think my first point was the one that Deborah made, which is that some of the data appears to be incorrect or missing. And I don't think we want to just sit by and accept that there are schools who are reporting zero throughout when it's a statutory duty and there's just no comeback on that. You know, if monitoring this means anything, then we should do something about that. So the ones where the data is absent, I think, you know, we need to get that data, and we need to remind the schools that this is a statutory duty to report. It's a statutory subject for which they must provide content, and, you know, just saying zero when we assume that's not true or the case, it isn't acceptable. We just need to get this information. But for the schools where information is provided, the information from the later item suggests that overall the national average, so if you had to kind of go on a single figure for overall RE provision, is 3.3%. The later item makes the point that does, you know, there's two statistical clusters there, one for schools of a religious character who average 6.9% and one for schools of not of religious character who average 2.2%. So if we're going to judge this against anything, then I guess national averages would be a good place to start, because at least they give us something to benchmark against, albeit that they don't tell the whole story. But if you're going to go to a crude single figure, that's a good place to go to, which again means looking at some of this data. We have schools where clearly provision level is equal to or exceeds the expected national average, ones where it appears to be around the range, and to be honest, the ones who aren't reporting are the ones where we seem to have a problem. So it's the non-reporting that seems to be the biggest issue there, and that's the area I feel we ought to follow up.
Thank you, Chair. I agree, and I think it would be good to be able to commend those schools that are providing a good level of timetable time, if you like, to deliver the religious education. But some of these things we have written to these schools in the past. Hathaway's one that we've written to, and to actually say, look, we know this is not what your provision is. Can you please make sure that in future you report this accurately? And in some cases, those schools we've written to have now started reporting, but in some not. So I think we probably just have to keep following that up.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. What's the actual mechanism by which we do that? Who does that?
There are several options. One is that I draft something and ask for Andrea and her colleagues' approval, and the other is when there are face-to-face when there were, or I don't know how they happen now, with the school leadership team, then the request is made that the question is asked at that meeting. But I'd have to ask Andrea about how those are working at the moment.
At the moment, they are held over Teams, Microsoft Teams, very much like we're doing today. So tomorrow I've got or2 for their meeting with me and Michelle Lucas, where I can speak to them about Gable Hall, and obviously clearly Hassenbrook is reported, but it's possibly, I can't see what the blue is because it's moved up a bit. Is that 2020?
Now that's old GCSE results, but it's just I put them there because I was pointing out that so for example, if you look at Gable Hall, they've got GCSE entries and GCSE results. So clearly the time provided in year 10 and 11 cannot be 0. They can't get GCSE results and not have any lessons. So I put them there just to show you where there are obviously issues with data reporting as opposed to provision.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly bring this up tomorrow with those schools and put it on the agenda for the other schools. Tomorrow is the first one we've got for this academic year. We haven't had any others yet, so that would be an easy quick fix.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Now, how does SACRE want me to report back?
At the next meeting?
Yeah, okay. So if we can put, Chair, if that's okay, if we can put something on the agenda, that will just remind me that I've got to get something ready for you. And however many I've done by then, I can let you know, yeah?
Yeah, that would be good, I think.
Okay, no problem.
Evening, Deborah.
Good evening. I'm trying to work out how to close the screen,
I don't know whether it would be helpful to do a letter in my name. I'm sure I have no Chair of SACRE doesn't have any great influence in these things, but whenever you have a change of sort of personnel, that's always an excuse to introduce yourself and ask questions again and maybe have another crack at getting an answer. And you know, certainly if I write, I would expect the courtesy of a response. So if we think that would be helpful, I don't mind signing off some of those.
Well, we have a head teacher on the line. I think we've got Christina with us. Christina might be able to give you some indication.
Hello, sorry, it is Christina. My line is going in and out, so the sound is very crackly. So I heard my name, but I didn't hear exactly what came before.
Sorry, Christina, that was me volunteering you for a job. It's Andrea. Just saying that Phil was saying he might write a letter to the head teachers as chair of SACRE, introducing himself and explaining well, Phil, you carry on.
Yeah, so there's an issue with data not being reported, or we strongly suspect being underreported. It's very hard for us to do our monitoring job without that information to go on. So the suggestion was, given as I've got an excuse as new chair of SACRE, I could just write introducing myself and also making the point that, you know, we really do need this data and it's important that it's reported, and, you know, reminding them that it's statutory duty as well. Do you think that would be an appropriate thing to do?
I do. I think that would be really helpful. I think the other thing is I sat and listened to the discussion earlier around, you know, the actual kind of gathering of information. I'm wondering where the information is being provided from, i.e. is it the RE lead who is providing this information?
No.
Senior leader. So I think that a direct and personal conversation with a senior leader in each of the secondary schools would be really helpful, because I'm wondering whether the inaccuracy are that it's not being provided by exactly the right person.
Christina, just to answer your question then, with your permission, Chair, the data comes from the Department for Education. It comes from the school workforce census, which is put in November. in most cases, that is a direct data transfer from the SIMS or whatever information management system is being used in the school. And so it's happening like that. And one of the problems that happens is if the school calls the subject philosophy and ethics, then it reports the wrong code. And that happens, I think it has happened at St Clair's, Angela, hasn't it?
It has,
So,
but
they need to get the code right, because otherwise they're reporting that they're non-compliant with the statutory subject, which is not a very nice thing to do to the with the DFE.
No, that's correct. It is called something else to identify it as being different from RE, but in terms of directing the reporting and the data on the code, it should be reported as RE and not as philosophy or ethics and philosophy, which is what a lot of schools call the GCSE, because it is philosophy and ethics rather than just basically Key Stage 3 RE. And that's to differentiate between the codes within the school. But then it does, when it comes to data gathering and collecting, it then falsifies that information because it's not being reported correctly. You're absolutely correct. I would say that most schools in our area are teaching across the key stages, but not always huge amounts, to be fair. I spoke to you earlier, Deborah, that we at St Clair's Key Stage 3 have an hour a week in years 7 and 8, an hour a fortnight in year 9, an hour a fortnight in year 10. There is also the option, we don't get big option groups, some schools do, we don't. But the time frame is very tight for the subject, so we're kind of like not forgotten as such, but we don't get as much time as we could have, because there isn't that time. There just isn't that time on the timetable. And that's where it's difficult. I mean, the way forward for us is possibly to do more whole days of RE rather than just having RE once a fortnight. The students do enjoy it. It's something that they really enjoy. It's a subject that when you get your teeth into it, the kids really, really love the ethical issues and the themes that we do as they go through the school. And the whole school teaching of the religions. We just implemented a brand new Sikhism, a brand new Islam scheme of work, a brand new alternative religions, and the children do really engage with the work, but it is finding the time in the timetable for it to be taught as we would want it to be taught as RE professionals. That's the issue.
Thanks for that. Are there any other comments anyone would like to make before we move on to documenting the actions we're going to take? Okay, one of the things I'm keen that we do in SACRE, recognising that, although I'd like to think otherwise, I strongly suspect that the broadcast audience for this meeting is not actually that large, is that we're really clear that we make decisions that will lead to us doing something in the outside world that, even in a small way, takes little steps forwards to improving the standards and practice of RE in Thurrock. So I'm keen that for each item we do either decide that we're not going to do anything and make a positive decision in that respect, or we are clear on the action that we're going to take. I picked up 2 from this one, so I'm suggesting that the committee is resolving, firstly, that we ask Andrea Winston to pick up areas of suspected underreporting in meetings with school leadership and report back the conclusions of those discussions at the next meeting. And secondly, we're asking Deborah if she could assist me in drafting a letter to those schools as chair of SACRE. Firstly, just introducing myself as a new chair, and secondly, highlighting the issue that we've picked up and asking them for a response on it. Are we happy with those as the 2 actions we're going to take on this one? Yes. Good, thank you. So, Deborah, I believe the second part of this item was to do with a task for reviewing primary school websites.
It is. I was just going to share the screen again, but hang on, it's refused. Let me see if it will share. Let me share the screen. Desktop. I think that's the one. There you go. So this is a document that I worked on with the National Association of Teachers of RE, because I'm conscious of the fact that SACREs like Thurrock have done some exercises where we've looked at the websites of different schools, but it's actually quite difficult to make a benchmark really of what we regard as being good practice and what we regard as being exceptional practice, if you like. So this chart, this table, tries to classify the characteristics of websites in relation to RE in a way that maybe makes it easier for SACREs to judge them. And obviously, this is it's an informal process in the sense that there's no formal recognition of these gradings. It's just hopefully a useful tool. And it was done in consultation with lots of primary schools and so on who've come back and fed into it. But most importantly, we need SACRE to feed into it, really. So I just wanted to know if, when you'd looked at this, whether it's clear to you, particularly those of you who are not RE specialists, is it clear what you would be looking for? And those of you who are RE specialists or involved in education, if there are areas that you think, again, we could strengthen.
Christina, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
I have, thank you. I was looking at it from a slightly different perspective. I think that this is hugely helpful, but we need to share this with schools. If head teachers had this, as a bit like an Ofsted framework, when one is thinking about how good one's school is, we're using an Ofsted framework globally to guide us. If this were shared with all schools, schools would be able to take very positive action quite quickly to move themselves certainly into green if they're not already, and then begin to think about exceptional practice.
I'd be really happy to do that.
Sounds like a really good idea. What mechanism do we have available for passing that round to schools?
Chair, I think the representative from the primary head group. I think that's how I've ended up on this committee. So I could, on behalf of SACRE, take this back via the TIFA, which is the primary heads group, if that would be helpful and appropriate.
That sounds great, thank you. Is there any equivalent for secondary we can use?
Yes, there is. Chair, could I ask as well that if it's shared with TIFA and with the secondary equivalent, that we ask for feedback on the document first before we perhaps say it's fixed, because it would be good to have improvements in it if there are things that people would like to strengthen and so on. I'd rather that happen before we send it out to schools in a more formal sense.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. There's no shame if you didn't. The task came fairly late and was quite difficult, and half of it was chopped off on the agenda. But did anyone have a go at this? And if so, do you have any feedback that you'd like to share, either on particular schools or on the format and usefulness of the document?
Chair, Stella has her hand up.
Okay, Stella, go ahead.
Right, thank you. I did have a look at the school's websites, and having not been very used to using a computer, as most of you are, it took me some time to actually scroll through to find what I thought was really important. But once I'd got through to the websites and managed to just look for what I was looking for, there's some very interesting differences, shall I say, amongst some of the primary schools that I looked at. Particularly, it was very obvious that some schools are totally in line with the sort of things that we would promote, and they stress the fact that they're following the agreed syllabus. And there's a couple of them who are also emphasising the idea of the British values statement as part of it, as well. So that was something else I thought was quite interesting. can I mention one of the schools which I thought was probably the one exceptional one that I thought would be exceptional? I don't know whether you would agree with this, but it's just as I looked at it and found it, it seems that Aveley Primary has definitely got lots of good practice. That's the green standards, but some also on the exceptional. Now, my question would be, how many of the categories within each column would you need to actually be that exceptional practice? Would you have to complete all of them or just some of them? That would be, like, from my point of view, how many would you have to do to say that's definitely that standard?
Stella, I think my normal benchmark for these kind of things was to use the best fit method. So that if you took each of the categories and you made a judgment for each of them, each of the rows, if you like, if there are more exceptional than there are green, then, you know, that would be the judgment. I don't know if other people agree with that method, but
okay,
that would be my suggestion.
Christina, did you have your hand up at one point, or was that from previous?
I did, but I've changed my mind, Chair. I was only going to say that as soon as I received this, of course, I was looking on the schools that I work with website to see where we would fit. So that was why I think heads will find it hugely useful.
So, Chair, I could send, so it could go through TIFA, and I could share it also through the head teacher's briefing. That would be another way of getting it out, so that if Christina puts it on the agenda for TIFA, it won't come as a complete surprise to them, because they would have seen it in the newsletter. Is that okay with you, Christine, Andrea?
Yeah, no problem. Fine.
I had a couple of bits of feedback on it.
Well, the bulletin is going every 2 weeks. The bulletin is going to Friday, so that's already been signed off, but we can put something about it in the next bulletin if you would like.
I had a couple of items of feedback on it. So the first was, you know, I found the evaluation tool quite helpful, and it was especially useful to, you know, to have almost an imaginary grid I could fill in. So I started going down the list saying, is the curriculum detail? Have they identified an agreed syllabus? Are the references on the website? That sort of thing. I thought it would be quite helpful if there could be a question related to each of these possible answers. So if you like, on a left-hand column, could there be a question for which the possible answer would be one of those four? Because I spend a bit of time trying to sort of work backwards to, we've got a list of things in the first row. What is the question that those things are possible answers to?
Could you give an example, Phil?
So if we just take the first row, exceptional says excellent levels of detail on RE curriculum plans. Green says the level of detail is at least compatible to foundation subjects. So I guess that the question that is being asked there is what level of curriculum detail is provided on the website. And it took me a while to go back and work out what question was I looking for an answer to. And, you know, normally when you see these evaluation tools, it starts with a question and then gives you a series of possible category answers. So could we just add the questions down the left effectively? And the omission, which I noticed because some schools were really good on it and there was nowhere I could commend them that for, was should we have a line on collective worship, given as it's an interest of SACRE?
Yeah, I can do that. Right, let's stop share.
And in terms of getting coverage, I think it sounds like a couple of people have had a look at it. There were over 30 primaries on the list. I don't know if anyone did the first 10, which was the suggestion, and I certainly don't know whether anyone would have done 30. I was wondering whether it might be appropriate to divvy it up amongst SACRE members and just maybe assign 2 or 3 to each. I hesitate to run an education committee where we give out homework, but I think if we had kind of an in-between meeting, you know, if you're anything like me, you tend to do all deadlines to the last minute. So we could maybe set an intermediate deadline and give everybody a few to look at, and that way we'd probably get better coverage. It doesn't feel necessary that we do it in a meeting with everyone there at the same time, and that way we can get a look at them having agreed the tool that we're going to use. But the approach that I took was to evaluate my nearest school on the basis of that would let me have a go at using the tool. And again, like the comment that was made about Aveley, I also thought Horndon, as far as I could tell, was all greens with some examples of exceptional practice. So maybe it would be good if we wrote to at least those two schools, as is suggested as an action, saying, you know, we've started looking at this exercise. SACRE looked at it. You know, we were especially, you know, impressed by the following aspects of what you've done on your website. Just wanted to record our thanks and support.
I think that'd be excellent.
Yeah,
Phil,
not asking them for anything, just write to the head, the chair of governors, and the head of RE, and saying, you know, it's great what you're doing. Keep up the good work. Almost.
Kenna, could you possibly, because in my papers, for example, the list of the websites that I sent out aren't here. So would it be possible to send that list of website addresses to everybody, and then perhaps give a pair of people, just 3 or 4 of them maybe, and just share them out?
Yeah, there's no problem. I can get them.
I think, Lynn, did you have your hand up? I think you did.
You need to unmute.
Right. So first of all, I apologise for being late to the meeting. I've tried every gadget and ended up just on my phone to get in with you. And I keep being told that my network is poor, so I hope you can see and hear me, most importantly. I do say I reflect the remarks made about the guidance. They were very helpful, and I too had trouble looking through all the school websites, as I'm not used to doing it, and I found a vast variety there, which didn't really help, but it was very interesting going through them. And one thing I did find that I found great difficulty with some of them for the question, the guidance on the parents and being informed about the curriculum. On some of them, there wasn't very much for the parents there for interaction and information. So, but yeah, I do agree with all that's been said. It was a very interesting exercise, and I found all the websites. I just did a search and found them all, so I got into them. Thank you.
So Lynn and Stella, who seem to have done some work on this, is it possible you could pass that on via Kenna so that we don't ask people to look again at ones that you've already done a look on? Because I think at this stage we want to try and cover them all. And then maybe we could divvy up the ones that haven't been looked at yet.
Right, I could forward what I've found out from. I could forward them in an email to Kenna.
If you're happy to do that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
You might be able to do that as well, then. Did you keep any notes? I think you're still muted.
Okay, so I'll let Kenna know the ones that I've looked at in most. I will say that I did look at all of them, so I'll just go back through and let Kenna know the 2 that I've got the most details on.
And while we're thinking about sort of letters of thanks and commendation, are there any that either of yourselves would pick out as, yeah, we ought to just say thank you and commend the quality of what they've got on their websites?
I did think East Tilbury were good with all their detail. Sorry, did you get that?
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Stella, you mentioned Aveley.
Yes, Aveley was one of the ones which stood out, and also Bourbon Church of England Academy. They had a lot of the would be in the green category, and I thought a couple on the exceptional as well.
Great. I'd add Horndon to that list, so maybe if we could do a letter of those. So I think, does anyone else have any further points they'd like to make before we come to agreeing our actions? Okay, so the actions I've picked up from that were that we would like to refine the template and share it with schools as a self-evaluation tool and for information that SACRE intend to start using something like this. And there were a couple of suggestions around sort of tweaks that we thought we could make before sending it out. So I think we'd like to do that, and we got mechanisms and routes by which we could get it out to schools. We said that we'd like to sort of complete the exercise for ourselves by breaking it up amongst SACRE members ready to report back in the next meeting. And Kenny, you agreed to review the ones where we've already got some information and divvy up the remainder. And then we said for schools that the initial work that had been done so far, where we'd identified, we'd like to write sort of on behalf of SACRE commending them and thanking them for what they've done, we'd do that. And I think there were 4 came out from that. Deborah, would you be happy to help draft a letter which could then go out in my name just doing that?
Yes, certainly I will. And Ken, also, can you just to circulate that list of email address, website addresses as well, to save everybody having to search them.
Adisha, did you have a comment to make?
Yes, on the 3rd row, where you've got RE features regularly, rather than the word regular, wouldn't it be better to say frequently, occasionally, and then rarely, just to sort of differentiate it a bit? Because regular is a bit ambiguous. I don't know how you feel about that.
So what were the words that you used again?
RE features frequently on the website.
Yep.
On the first column. In the middle column, there are occasional references. And then the 3rd column's all right. There's little reference. Can you see it's on the 3rd row?
I can. Thank you.
Yeah, I get the point. Regular can technically mean once every 3 years without fail.
Yeah. Whereas if you say sort of frequently or occasionally, it gives it a bit more, it demarcates it a bit.
Thank you.
I've just gone and muted myself. As a committee, are we happy to approve those actions to go ahead? Good, thank you. So let's move on then. If we can take item 7 before item 6, which is work plan review and update, just to make sure we do have an agreed work plan for next year while we core it. So this was also Deborah, if you could introduce, please. You muted. I just did that as well.
Oh, done it. Okay, so the last column's been cut off, so I'm going to screen share. Screen 1. Because I added some success criteria this year so that we could measure our success. So I've added some other areas because, of course, with COVID, we could only do virtual things. And there's a bit more detail in the last column and so on. So really, I'm just asking really for your comments on this because you've all seen it. I'll leave the first page up first. So for those of you who weren't on the committee last year, the way this plan has developed has been to list in the left-hand column the areas which are our statutory responsibilities, and then to describe what the actions are that we need to take to fulfil those statutory responsibilities. And then, the other columns are quite self-explanatory, I think. and the likewise comes down here, and that's the end. And then that then evolves into this, which is essentially our schedule for setting up the meetings. Yeah, so that's how that works. I'm trying to make it fit.
It was a minor point on that. Do we mean spring 2021 and summer 2021?
We certainly do. I think I need to change that. Changed.
Does anyone have any comments on that? Suggestions they'd like to make? Things they think might be missing or that we might want to add emphasis to?
Chair, Mr. Agitella has his hand up.
Let me unmute, that might be better. Welcome, Tunde. You had your hand up. I know we had your partial apologies that you were going to be turning up late, so it's good to see you managed to make it.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just thanks, Chair, and apologies for coming late. I told Ken I'd be joining. I joined halfway through the last point. I was in a Basildon hospital meeting. Sorry. Sorry. The only thing I wanted to add really is maybe this was taken at a previous meeting, but monitoring provision on the GCSE and the A-level results. If next year, and I know it's nobody can predict or forecast that, but if they decide to do next year what they did this year in terms of without being politicizing it, the way which results were arrived at, using teachers' assessments rather than end of year exams, how do we then ensure that there's a level playing field when we try to monitor these? This year was like a brand new thing. I don't think we'd done that before, and I wasn't involved when you carried out the assessment this year, but it's just something I'm curious about. Thank you.
Chair, would you like me to answer or offer an answer to that question?
Rather you than me.
So, an interest, the Ofqual, who are the government's agency that look at examinations and the fairness of examinations, published some interesting data after this exercise took place. And they compared the grades awarded in different subjects by teacher assessment and the one that was used, but using that ill-fated algorithm. And what was really interesting is that if you look at religious studies, the gap between those two was really quite small. In other words, the teacher assessments were much, seemed to be quite accurate. So that, I think that gives me more confidence in using that kind of data. Although I'll have to defer to Andrea on this, but I think it's fairly likely that we won't be able to get school level data because the government are certainly not going to publish them. But I don't know whether we'll be able to get them locally.
Yeah, I can confirm we haven't asked for it, and we've been asked not to ask for teacher assessments, and we won't be, even if we had it. And some schools have shared them with us. We can't use them. The DfE made it quite clear. No results from last year will be published. Although they have said this year exams will take place, they'll take place 3 weeks later. There is a movement to try to get exams, including SATs, cancelled. At the moment, the government's not moving on that. Obviously, who knows what will happen between now and the summer, and whether schools go into a full lockdown like they did before, although they didn't close. But at the moment, there's no data published for last academic year. The end of this academic year, exams are expected to take place 3 weeks later. But it's a watching brief, I'd suggest.
And Christina, you wanted to come in as well.
Yes, thank you. It was just in relation to your question about the work plan. And I was just looking particularly on objective 4 around engaging with local schools. And it notes there about holding online discussions with subject leaders. Given that there won't be the ability to have the lovely youth conference, although I know that there may be an opportunity to do that virtually, I wondered whether in that section 4 there might be any opportunity to include children. So in the same way that obviously if any school is scrutinised, it's important to speak to all stakeholders. And I wonder whether where schools will agree, it might be possible to include children virtually in discussion around the quality of RE provision.
So is the suggestion there that if we're able to arrange one of these, we maybe do a kind of double session where we perhaps have conversations with the subject leader, but also if they've got a representative group of children, we do a session with them as well as part of the sort of the virtual visit, if you like.
Chair, we have had the Youth Council come along to a SACRE meeting, or representatives of it, but to do it with individual schools, I agree, would be a new level of detail, and I think a very valuable one.
And I guess I'm looking to the teacher representatives to sort of confirm, do we think that's practical and viable? Is it something that if it was suggested to you, would you put your head in your hands or think, yeah, we could arrange that? Christina?
I would be very happy to say that the schools that I work with, we could be your guinea pigs, if you like. And if we were chosen as one of the selections, we could trial it and see how it goes. And then perhaps on the basis of success or otherwise, we might be able to involve more schools and more children.
It sounds like there's some logistics we'd have to sort out, but I guess that's what the work programme is for. So should we add that to the work programme as an aspiration, that we're going to at least look at how could we do that? Great, so if we can minute that as an addition, are there any other comments before we move to agreeing the work programme? Lynn?
Right, get my mic going. Sorry, just to say to Debbie that as I wasn't with you last year, and I'm learning everything at a fast gallop, I found this very informative. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Mute button.
Chair, you're muted.
Yeah, I think I have quite a slow computer, and I click it and then click it again because it hasn't done it, and then it mutes and unmutes. We'll get there. So if there's no further comments, are we happy to agree the work programme subject to that addition? Good, thank you. Let's note that. So we're on to what is now the last item, which was item 6 on the agenda. National developments that SACRE should consider. It's quite a long appendix of these, but Deborah, if you could start by introducing for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's been quite a busy time in the world of RE. I think there's been a lot of attempts to try to support schools with online resources and supporting teachers and so on. So it will probably take, I don't know, it would probably take a very long time to go through each of the items. And I'm assuming that everybody has read the paper. So would it be, do you want me to go through each item, or would you like me to ask if people have questions on them on each page, perhaps, Chair?
If perhaps we start by giving people the opportunity to identify any that they we're especially keen to make note of or take action on. And then if there's any we don't pick up that way, perhaps we can just review at the end. Again, I am keen to get sort of clearly documented actions or agreement on these if there's any we actually want to do anything about. I'm not necessarily expecting we would take action on all of them, but we should perhaps highlight somewhere we'd like to.
So top of page 21 is a very specific question about whether we should do something about the Spirited Arts competition, whether we would like to run a local competition on Spirited Arts, which of course is quite an interesting, you can see the picture on the page 20, that's an example of a Spirited Arts entry. It's a fantastic competition. It's been running for a lot of years, and the great thing about it as well is it manages to combine both you know, the academic side of religious education and religious studies, because the children will write about their artwork, but also gives a vent to their creativity. So we ran it. It could be something that could be done through home learning if that was necessary, or it could be done in school.
Okay, any comments from members of the committee on that one? Angela?
I think that it would be a really, really good idea to do it cross-curricular within the art and crafts departments of schools too, so that they're involved. They've got the materials, they've got the resources, and we could do some collective working on that across schools with whichever departments would want to take. I'm sure all schools would want to take part in this. Some schools are going to have more resources than others, so if it's more of a cross-curricular project, I think you get a lot of uptake with it. It's a great idea. And I think we get to get some really, really beautiful pieces of work that get the children to think really deeply about faith, about community, about culture, and about other people's ideals too.
Great, thank you. Tunde?
Sorry, Chair, I don't need to say anything anymore because that's exactly what I was going to say, Angela's, you know, so I'm nodding like a nodding dozen in agreement. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought this looked like a really exciting opportunity. Do we know how we would take it practically forward if we were keen to promote this?
I think, like we've mentioned with the previous item, we can use the head teacher's briefing as a way of getting the information out there, and also send it directly to the RE coordinators in primaries, particularly that we know about. We can ask Christina again, her good offices, to take it to TIFA, and we can, you know, get and the secondary version of that. So just really get this out there, and perhaps even put it in the briefing more than once, just in case people happen to miss it. And then once we've done that, we set a deadline, we get the work back in, and then once we've done that, we then have a judging activity as part of a SACRE meeting.
Adisha?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good idea. What you could do, and forgive all the fireworks that are going off at the moment, you could extend it out to music as well. I don't know if that's possible. So don't just restrict it to artwork. You know, so people wanted to do music, sing songs, that kind of thing, and that it becomes a bit more all-encompassing then.
There is another competition called Spirited Music, and another one called Spirited Poetry, which is separate from this. So I'm trying to sort of pace us a bit, because obviously it's going to be it's the first time we've done it.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm a little bit nervous about taking on anything that's a bit arts this time, and then perhaps move into music next time. I think I feel a little bit more confident about it.
That's fine.
Yeah. Oh, so gone.
Chair Tundi has his hand up.
And then I looked up and I couldn't find the chair. You're muted, Chair, so I don't know if I can continue or not. Okay, the sign language, we take to sign language, that's cool. Just to clarify, even though we agree, if we do agree to this, Debbie, it doesn't mean it's still down to individual schools to actually go for that, to actually take it on rather than SACRE as a whole. So we might promote it, is that what we're saying? But it's down to schools to actually decide whether or not they want to take it. Because I was looking at the website, because the information here is good, but it has for more information here, which made me curious enough to go to the website, and it talks about the cost and the rewards for that, which is payment for a teacher. So it has to be taken on by schools rather than SACRE. Isn't that how it works?
I was suggesting we do this at 2 levels. So we'd publicise it to schools, encourage children to take part in it, ask the schools then to scan and send the work in electronically, not to send the originals because that's just a nightmare. So electronic versions coming through. Then we have a judging process, but the schools then have the opportunity to enter the national competition, which is the one that you found on the website. And they can enter that, and there are lots of prizes and lots of opportunities for the win. But if we did a local one, this would be just for us. We would just be encouraging children in Thurrock to do it, and we can decide if we get a lot of entries. We might decide that we want to arrange an exhibition in a gallery or in a library, or but we've got to see how much people are prepared to take it up before we can run. So I'm suggesting we walk first.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Debbie.
So overall, are we minded that we would like to take this forward and promote a local round of this in Thurrock? Okay, shall we note that as a decision then? And yeah, that sounds really exciting. I look forward to seeing what comes out of it. I suspect in the interest of simplicity, it might be best just to work down the list of these. Actually, Deborah, if you could introduce each one. Yes,
of course. Okay, so the second one is about the Farmington scholarships, and that's something that's an opportunity for teachers to apply for a term or more than a term if they do it part-time out of school, and it's all funded. It's been a very successful program. It's been running for many, many years. So this is just something I'd like to share with schools, just so that people are aware that they can apply for it. There have been people in Thurrock that have done it before. So it's just that it's really good that it's carried on. So I'd like to share that. Interfaith Week, I've had some communication from schools already with suggestions, questions about how they can do Interfaith Week in these kind of circumstances.
So just to stop you for a second there, on the second one, are we proposing to take any particular action, or are we leaving that one for noting?
It'd just be a communication with schools, really, and particularly with teachers.
Okay, so are we happy to communicate that out to schools? Just nods. Yep, sounds like a good information thing.
So on page 22, the action on this is about Interfaith Week. I've had communication from schools who are asking if people are prepared to offer their services to remotely speak to answer children's questions. Humanist UK have offered their services free of charge, so that they are available to be booked to speak to children during Interfaith Week if people are doing things like that. But I just wanted to ask if there was, particularly representatives of different faith and belief organisations, if you know of others who might be prepared that I can let schools know about, that can answer questions from children during Interfaith Week.
Angela?
I'd like to say that we have a teacher in the school who is very good. The teacher is of the Islamic faith, we have assemblies twice a year when he talks the whole school on what it's like to go on Hajj and pilgrimage, and also what it's like for him as a teacher during Ramadan. So I know for a fact that if you wanted somebody from the faith to talk to children about the faith and answer questions, he would be very, very keen to do so.
To save that teacher getting completely inundated, Angela, perhaps we can have a discussion afterwards about maybe how he could record what he says with your children, so that we can then perhaps use it with others.
Definitely. I wish we'd done that when he spoke last time. It hasn't obviously been this year due to not being in school since March, but last November when he last went on Hajj and shared it with the children, it was amazing, because obviously children have very big misconceptions about some faiths, and when they hear what happens and see the pictures and actually explore it in depth from somebody who's done it, it's so much more meaningful. And that would be, I think he'd be very, very up for actually doing that, and doing some very small podcasts perhaps.
Yeah.
And doing these podcasts on different aspects of the faith, so children then could ask questions, and he could come back and answer those, maybe on some kind of web page, or on some of the format, if we had some format where the children could view them and leave their questions, and then the questions are then answered. But there's definitely people in our school, there's definitely people of faith in our school that would be very happy to do that. And I work closely with him, so I know I'm not speaking out of turn here. I know that he definitely would want to do this.
That's great. Thank you, Angela.
I think I'd be happy to recommend the proximity schools team, who'll be known to schools like Hassenbrook, Gablehorse and Clares in the sort of the eastern end of the borough. Charlotte Harmon would be the contact there, but they do things like chaplaincy, prayer spaces in schools, that sort of thing, but would also be happy to provide contacts for individuals who'd be happy to talk about aspects of their faith, I'm sure.
If you can let me have the contact details of that after the meeting, Phil, that would be really great, and I can then share that on this release about Interfaith Week.
Yep.
Okay.
I want to check with her that she's happy to do so.
Yeah. Obviously, ask first rather than apologise later. So that would be that communication. Then after that, we've got a very interesting resource, quite an exciting resource. If we had time, I would, if you've pressed the button and clicked to look at the link, this anti-racist RE resources, which have been published by NATRE through a grant, are, I think, really, really good, and obviously something that will be continued to develop. And so I'd like to share those with schools as well in this briefing. I've got to try and keep the briefing relatively short, because I know that there's always a challenge for space in those briefings.
I had some nervousness about the anti-racism one, which I'd like some reassurance on, because obviously the title itself generates a positive feeling straight away. But having looked at it a bit, the anti-racist movement is quite a specific political ideology. It's not a general, we're against racism in an equality sense. It's more specific than that. And certainly it's run itself into quite a lot of controversy recently. So the toppling of statues stuff, which has hit the news, has been done in the name of anti-racism. The National Trust ran an initiative to promote it and then got investigated by the Charities Commission. The Charities Commission said, look, we're not saying what you're doing isn't worthy, but it isn't actually in your charitable objectives. Therefore, it's not something that you've got a mandate to do. You know, it's moving beyond the field that your charitable objectives set you up for. So I'm I suppose a bit nervous that I haven't actually looked at the resources, and if you're recommending them, I'd kind of take it on trust that they're pretty good. But in doing this, we're also effectively aligning ourselves with a movement which has found its way into quite a lot of controversy recently. And the other one is that, as we've already highlighted, we are really tight on curriculum time for meeting our absolute core objectives of promoting understanding of faith, promoting knowledge of religion and belief and that sort of thing. And once we take this in, will we then be asked to say, well, we're doing a sort of a race and anti-racism perspective and critique on religion and belief, will we then say, well, we then really ought to do a feminism one, we ought to do a disability one, we ought to do a gender and gender identity one, and that kind of thing. And actually, we're starting to crowd out stuff that we know we're already really tight on. So they I guess, were my two concerns.
If I just share this, I hope the right screen. No, wrong screen. Stop presenting. I want to share this page, if it will let me. Oh, no, the technology is not letting me share. I've got the page of the actual resources, and several things. First of all, you've got the whole GCSE theme of about racism and discrimination and stereotyping, which of course makes this stuff very relevant. But also the British values area of the curriculum, which is across the whole curriculum. So respect and tolerance for people of different religions and beliefs. And it's very specific. So if I just read you out some of primary, we've got how did St. Peter learn that God has no favourites, the story of Peter, the golden rule and the silver rule, anti-racist people from different religions. We've had a lot of work in schools on people like Martin Luther King and so on, but this one is focusing more on people in Britain and people that are alive today. I think it's good to bring the materials into the 21st century. So there's a lot of material there that will be useful, but we can offer it to schools and ask for their feedback on it as well, so that we can decide whether there are concerns. I think it's highly unlikely.
I think comments from others. Sunday?
Unmute. Am I unmuted? Yeah, I am. Thank you. Chair, thank you, and David, thanks for bringing it to us. I think when it comes to this, it almost always gets into some sort of controversial area. The topic in itself, anti-racist area, and I looked at this and I tried to examine it from two different areas. A, is it RE? B, what is anti-racist RE? Just to clarify. But reading it and going to the website, which I was trying to share my screen to, but I can't. So again, I think I can see the merits of it. I certainly can see the positives of it, and I can see the well, you know, read the thinking behind it. My challenge is, would it be politicized with a small p? And that's my key thing. Would it be, you know, A, SACRE, B, the councillors on here might want to have a view about what it could mean for the council in itself. But for us, SACRE, would it be politicizing it, especially in areas of Thurrock, which from other information we all know has already got loads of tension, if anything else, around this subject matter. So while I don't mind us, you know, passing this information to schools, which they could get from any other area anyway, you know, that's information source, I'm not sure I'm going to put my weight behind promoting it. It's information which they could get anywhere else. This website is open for anyone, so we could pass it across, but I'm not sure I would want to put my weight behind promoting it, only because of the small p politics and people taking it out of sequence. I think last year, 2 years ago, we had some sort of tension in Thurrock and SACRE when we had some, you know, people taking their children out of school when religious topics were being taught and all that stuff, and that hit the press. And I'm just trying to be mindful of all of those when we try to go with this. So I'm not sure where that leaves me. I don't know if it's sitting on the fence, but I think information but not promoting is my suggestion. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments to make? So would people be happy that we circulate this to schools, but phrase it rather than we endorse this when I suspect most of us haven't read it in detail, and there are the sort of wider small p political concerns, that we actually ask for their feedback on its sort of suitability and relevance in Thurrock, and that way we're making sure that they get a chance to look at the material and evaluate it for themselves, but we're making it clear that we're asking them their views on it rather than pushing them to use it. I'm seeing nods. And anybody unhappy with that approach?
No, it sounds like a sensible approach, Chair.
Good. Okay, let's go for that then. GCSE results was the next one.
Okay, so this is at the bottom of the page, page 22. You'll see that there has been a decline in entries in religious studies, but it's stabilised this year. So I think that's something to celebrate. Obviously, the short course GCSE is basically declining very rapidly, most certainly because it doesn't count in the performance tables. And so even though it's a really valuable course and counts for the children, very few schools do a short course nationally now. So that's quite sad. I guess when we're looking at the data, when we come to look at the data in the future, we'll be able to look at how our results and our entries compare with the national figures. I think Andrea has already reported on the next bit, which is changes in RS examinations for 2021. And so, that's already been covered. And I've reported that on page 23. Then turning over the page to page 24. This was a concern that teachers...
Are we proposing to take any specific action on either of those?
We can't yet until we get more data.
Okay, so we can just leave those as
standing.
I mean, they're published in the minutes anyway, but we're not noting any action we intend to take as a result.
No.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, sorry. I know we've done item 7, but this is very much linked with the action in item 7, isn't it? Where we're going to review. So I think it's a link there. Just to say, I agree with you, Jay, that there's no action we can take now because we don't have the data. But we've got what plan to actually deal with it later on.
Yeah, it's a good point. We will come back to it in the action plan.
Okay, then turning over to page 24, some teachers, including some in Thurrock, were expressing concerns that when schools returned in September, that maybe religious education would be squeezed on the timetable because of the attempt to catch children up, particularly when they're doing their GCSEs and so on. And the government then published information specifically mentioning RE to say they must continue to teach the statutory subjects. I think this information has already been shared with schools, that guidance that came out. I mean, Andrew, I'm sure you can nod that the head teachers were informed of that guidance to continue with the curriculum as was.
I can confirm that every head teacher is contacted by the DfE directly. It doesn't come from us anymore because we were requested not to repeat information that was coming from the DfE because they were getting it already, and they get so many emails and so much traffic from the DfE. They didn't want us to resend that information, so we haven't been. Now and again we'll put links into the head teacher's bulletin, but no, it hasn't come from the local authority. It would have come directly from the DfE. Right.
Okay. So that information has by now been sent out. So there isn't any necessity for us to do that then, Chair, on page 25 because it's already happened via the DfE. At the bottom of page 20, at the bottom of page 25 is some work that's been done politically to help parliamentarians understand what's going on with RE, and this is the Shadow Minister for Faiths, Janet Davey, recently appointed as a Shadow Minister for Faiths, asking a question to Nick Gibb about what's being done to make sure that schools teach RE, because as in Thurrock, we're finding schools are not necessarily teaching it, and this is a problem nationally. So she was asking the question, well, what is the DfE doing to ensure maintained schools comply with the requirements? And you can see the minister's answer there. Most notably, if you look at the bottom, this is Adisha, this will interest you with your interest in statistics and how they can be used and misused. You notice the last sentence, at a national level, the proportion of time secondary schools spending teaching RE has actually remained broadly stable. It was 3.2% of all teaching hours in 2010 and 3.3% in 2020. So if you turn over the page, you'll see my notes. So 3.2% is 50 minutes a week. Okay, that's great. Except that this, of course, includes a very significant number of schools with religious character. So when you take those schools out of the equation, you go from 3.2 down to 2.2, which is only about 33 minutes on average. So this is an example of where statistics. You'll be pleased to know that the particular minister concerned is planning to ask a supplementary question of the minister to try and answer that particular point. But it'd be interesting when we look at our figures and we look at what the percentages are. And that's why it was good, Phil, that you drew attention to the national average. If we use that as the benchmark, we can then look to see, and you'll see that in Thurrock, how the school's religious character often have much greater number of hours than the other schools in the borough. So we have looked at that today. We have mentioned that today already. May I go on to the next part?
Yeah, just say that thanks for that. That's good. And I think the actions we've already agreed on chasing up on that should enable us hopefully to get a better picture on that. So the next one is, you know that in a previous meeting we've had look at how, because the Minister for Schools, Nick Gibb, has regularly encouraged SACREs to use the complaints process, and we've talked before about the challenges of using a formal complaints process against one of our own schools. This is a complaint that was against an academy, and it was actually launched by a parent, and it took a very long time to go through, but the Education Schools Funding Agency has now found in favour of the parent, and the school has now reinstated religious education back onto its timetable. And I've put this, might this be grounds for complaint apply to any Thurrock academies, but I think that's a next step after Andrea and her team investigate what is actually happening, because obviously the best outcome would be that first of all that we find out that the data is not necessarily completely accurate and they are doing the RE. If it's not, then I'm sure it's the kind of conversation that Andrea and her team can have with them, and this would be a next step, but it is a step that is open to SACRE. Tunde, go ahead.
Thanks, Jay. Just a very quick question, Debbie, please. What is discrete RE? Discrete lessons in RE. What is discrete?
Where religious education is taught itself, so it's the whole section of that timetable, that whole lesson is just about religious education. What has happened in a number of schools, including some in Thurrock, is RE has been combined with PSHE or with citizenship, and obviously that waters down the amount of knowledge and understanding. Ofsted are picking it up. They're saying that's not good enough. Schools must give a curriculum which is equally broad and ambitious as any other school. So if you water it down, it's obviously not as broad and ambitious. But it does happen, and it happens a lot.
All right, thank you. Thanks for clarifying. Just wasn't sure. Thank you.
So moving on to the bottom of page 26.
My unmuting is still rather slow. I was just going to say, I hope we would always regard doing something like going down a formal complaints route as an absolute last resort, and we would look at positive engagement as our main means for sort of influencing. And I hope tonight some of our actions, we've looked at positive encouragement as a tool for doing that as well. But it is actually good to know that if push comes to shove and for some reason positions become entrenched and difficult to move, that actually, although it took 2 years, so it's not a process I'd be desperately keen to engage in, nonetheless, the end result was that the law was upheld, and it was found that the school couldn't just choose to ignore it for their own reasons. And actually the fact that, as is often the thing with case law, the fact that it exists and it's been proven can be helpful in discussions if sort of the hint of a stick is required. It often means that you don't actually have to get to going down the whole same process again in order to get to the same outcome.
The DFE have reassured the parent that actually in future it would not take that long. It's only because it was the first time they'd ever done it, that there had been no other examples of that complaint. That's why it took so long. The civil service relies on precedent, as I'm sure you know, and if there's no precedent, it's much more difficult to get a process in place. The next document, for those of you who are interested in modern developments in the subject, this report is really fascinating. This is Worldviews in Education. We've talked about it when we talked about the Commission, but this is a group of academics who've now been who launched this report, Professor Trevor Cooling, who's the current chair of the RA Council. And if you want to hear it, it's been recorded, so you can go on the link and you can listen to it again. And it, as I say, it really is fascinating about how the subject is developing to take on board worldviews in its broader sense. Not worldviews as in anything goes, but worldviews as in children's own worldviews, which include both religious and non-religious worldviews. That's how this phrase is being used. My friend Jeff Teese said, when you hear the phrase fish and chips, you know that when you get the chips are not going to be a form of fish. So when you have religion and worldviews, you know that it's two distinctive things. So the religion is religion, as in the concept of religion, and the worldviews is both religious and non-religious worldviews, which of course include all the traditional traditions and ways of life that we talk about in this subject. So I do commend that to you, and it might be something that we want to discuss at a future meeting, which is what I've recommended to you, that if you want to read it and if you are interested, it will be a good discussion to have, perhaps with a speaker that can talk about it, to keep SACRE up to date with what's happening.
Given that we have 3 meetings a year and are pretty tight for time in those, is there a place where it would obviously slot in, something it's kind of complementary to?
I'd have to look at the work plan, Chair.
I mean, and personally, it's a subject I find fascinating, and I know that generally anything done by Theos tends to be pretty good and well thought through. But at the same time, I am nervous that we may have more practical things to concern us. I perhaps ought to listen to it.
It will be a great discussion to have with the Youth Cabinet when the young people come along, to ask about how they feel about it, about the subject being more about their own personal, including more about their own personal worldviews and how they develop and how worldviews can be diverse and change over time. Perhaps we could consider that and make a decision about it a bit later, because something might occur to somebody about how that might work.
I mean, I'm hesitant to sort of over delegate on this, but I think we've probably got the power to determine the agenda. Would people be happy that I just, when we're starting to discuss the agenda for the next meeting in detail, that I look at whether it's complementary to anything and therefore sort of merits a slot? Would we be happy with that approach? Okay, we'll go with that then. I'm aware of time, but we're actually doing pretty well considering. We're just on to our hour and a half now. We're quite close to finishing.
We are.
Let's go through the last couple of points again, just highlighting anything that requires specific action. So are you on page 27 now, Chair, or back? You want to look at page 26? 27, I think we're on to.
27, okay. So this is a good news and bad news page. So the good news is that during lockdown, there was a surge in applications for teachers. And so we ended up with the best number of trainee RE teachers training from September this year that we've ever had. So we actually met and exceeded our target. And so there are 600 trainee secondary RE teachers at the moment, which is fantastic news. That's largely, I think, been boosted by the fact that there's a training bursary in action, and also that there's a subject knowledge enhancement grant in place to help people that are not RE specialists, of which there are very few, of course. There's only about 100 people come out of theology and religious studies degrees into teaching every year, and we need 600. So those other 500 have come from politics, philosophy, history, all sorts of other subjects. So those subject knowledge boosters have been vital. So that was the good news. The bad news, of course, is obviously money is in short supply in national government. And the first thing that went, of course, was the training bursaries for almost all subjects. And if just before we get unhappy about the fact that RE has lost its bursary, if you look down that column, you in the purple, you'll see that actually loads of subjects have lost their bursary, including history and geography, all the EBAC subjects and so on. The ones that have survived are, of course, the sciences, languages, maths, those kind of subjects are the ones that have survived with a training bursary. So even English, even English has lost its bursary, subject as strong as English. So it's difficult, and we don't yet know how that's going to affect us. But meanwhile, in Thurrock, of course, we still have training course going on, people training teachers of religious education in the schools. So I think what I'm suggesting is that that's something that I could come back to you and find out a little bit more about. How, you know, what is the situation in our schools, and how does it affect us? And then the last one is about the resources I mentioned at the beginning, for helping children that are working or doing home learning because they're either being quarantined or other reasons for working at home. And so this is a whole load of resources that are available for people that are doing that, been made available free of charge from NatTray. And then the Strictly RE course, that's the last thing I wanted to share with schools. And that's it.
So we're happy to note that we'll get those things sent out in what's now sounding like quite a stuffed bulletin that will be going out.
I can be succinct when I try.
Is everyone content with that? Brilliant. Thanks for that, Deborah. Thank you, everybody, for making the time to come along in what I'm sure for some will be quite tough circumstances with all the various things that are going on. And thanks everyone also for getting us through the agenda within a whisker of the time that we said we hoped to. So meeting closed at 20:03. Is there anything else we need to do, Kenna or Deborah, before we let everyone go?
No, that's it, Chair. Thank you very much, everybody.
That's all from me too.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.